My daughter stood in my doorway, demanding I pay her husband's $500,000 debt by noon tomorrow. Her husband just smirked and said, "Don't make us wait." I nodded, calm as ever. 4 hours later, I was gone. No note, no warning. When they came back for the money, all they found was a locked door and a single box on the porch. Inside was a letter. This is where your real lesson begins. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from right now. Let me take you back to the beginning. Before betrayal, before the word revenge ever crossed my mind. My name is Robert Mitchell, and for most of my life, I believed that family meant sacrifice. I built my business from the ground up, worked 60-hour weeks, and ensured my daughter Emily never wanted for anything. I paid for her private school, her college, her wedding, and her first house. I thought I was giving her the world. I didn't realize I was teaching her to expect it. Emily was my only child. She was bright, ambitious, and beautiful. But as the years went by, I watched her change. The little girl who used to beg me for bedtime stories grew into a woman who only called when she needed something. Still, I told myself that's what parents are for. I wanted to believe that every check I wrote was an act of love, not enabling. Then she married Brandon. From the start, I had my doubts. Brandon was charming, always with a new business idea, always promising the next big thing. But behind the charm was a man who never seemed to work, who always needed just a little help to get his ventures off the ground. I tried to warn Emily, but she insisted Brandon was a genius, just misunderstood. For a while, I played along. I paid for their down payment on a house in Westlake, covered the grandkids' tuition at St. Andrews, and even invested in Brandon's first startup. When that failed, I told myself it was just bad luck. When the second and third ventures collapsed, I started to see a pattern. But by then, Emily was in too deep, and every time I tried to pull back, she'd remind me of everything I'd done for her in the past. Family first, right, Dad? I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that all the sacrifices were worth it, that I was building a legacy. But the truth was, I was just plugging holes in a sinking ship. The more I gave, the more they needed. The more I tried to help, the more they resented me for not doing enough. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself that one day, Emily would see the truth. That one day, she'd thank me for everything I'd done. But that day never came. Instead, the requests got bigger, the guilt trips sharper, and the gratitude faded into entitlement. The night before everything changed, I sat in my study, sipping bourbon and reviewing quarterly reports. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like a storm waiting to break. I looked at the family photos on the wall. Emily at 5, missing her front teeth. Emily at 18, beaming in her cap and gown. Emily at 28, radiant on her wedding day. Each photo felt like a window into a life that no longer existed. When the doorbell rang, I knew it was them. Emily only rang like that when she needed money. I opened the door to find her standing there, her smile tight, her eyes hard. Brandon stood behind her, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. "Daddy," Emily said, hugging me a bit too long. The embrace felt rehearsed, like she was cashing in on old memories. Brandon brushed past me without a word, heading straight for my favorite chair. We sat in the living room, the tension thick enough to cut. Emily fiddled with her pearl necklace, the one I'd given her for her 30th birthday. She always touched it when she was about to ask for something. Brandon spread documents across the coffee table, his cologne filling the room. "Let's cut to the chase, Rob," Brandon said, not even bothering with pleasantries. "We have a situation." Rob, not Dad, not even Mr. Mitchell. Just Rob, like I was a business associate, not the man who'd paid for his wedding. Emily's voice was high, brittle. "Daddy, you know we wouldn't come to you unless it was necessary. You've always said family comes first, and we're family." I tried to keep my voice steady. "What happened to the investment property in Round Rock?" Brandon shrugged. "Market corrections, temporary setback. But that's not why we're here." Emily's wedding ring spun around her finger, her grandmother's ring. She always did that when she was lying. Brandon's been working so hard on this new venture. Tech startup. Very promising, revolutionary really. "How much?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Brandon leaned back in my chair. $500,000. We need it in our account by noon tomorrow." The room spun. My migraine started its familiar throb. $500,000, just like that. Emily dabbed at her eyes, but I saw no tears. The mortgage, the kids, the schools. You know how expensive everything's gotten. I did know. I paid for those schools directly. I'd covered the down payment on their house. I'd bailed them out more times than I could count. Brandon poured himself a drink from my bar. These aren't bank people we're dealing with, Rob. They're serious individuals. Would hate for this to affect your reputation at the country club. The threat was clear. My blood pressure spiked. Emily's voice was soft, but her words were sharp. If Mom were still alive, she'd be ashamed of how you're treating us. That was the moment I realized. The daughter I loved was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as nothing more than a checkbook. But I wasn't going to let them bleed me dry any longer. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, the house still and silent. I barely slept, my mind replaying every word from the night before. I kept thinking about how easily Emily and Brandon had demanded $500,000, as if it were their right. The betrayal stung deeper than any business deal gone bad, any friendship lost. This was my own daughter, the person I'd loved and protected for her entire life, now treating me like a bank with a heartbeat. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from my mug. The memories came in waves. Emily's first bike ride, her high school debate trophies, the way she used to run into my arms after school. I wondered when that little girl had disappeared, replaced by someone who could look me in the eye and threaten my reputation if I didn't pay her husband's debt. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Don't forget, Dad. Noon. We're counting on you." A minute later, Brandon. "Don't make us come back. You know what's at stake." I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. This wasn't just about money. This was about respect, about boundaries, about the years I'd spent sacrificing for a family that now saw me as nothing more than a safety net. I thought about all the times I'd bailed them out, all the times I'd said yes when I should have said no. I realized I'd been enabling them, not helping them. I walked through the house, taking in every detail. The family photos, the souvenirs from trips I'd taken with Emily when she was young, the gifts I'd given her over the years. Each one felt like a piece of my heart that had been taken for granted. I stopped in front of a photo from her college graduation. She was beaming, her arms around me, her eyes full of hope. I wondered if she'd ever truly appreciated what I'd done for her, or if she'd always seen me as a means to an end. The betrayal wasn't just in the demand for money. It was in the way they'd cornered me, used my love for them as a weapon. Brandon's threats about my reputation, Emily's guilt trips about her mother, the way they'd rehearsed their performance, it all felt like a carefully orchestrated attack. I realized they didn't see me as a father anymore. I was just an obstacle, a hurdle to be overcome. I thought about calling Margaret, my ex-wife. She'd warned me about this years ago, told me I was making a mistake by always giving in. But I'd ignored her, convinced that love meant never saying no. Now I saw how wrong I'd been. The clock ticked closer to noon. My phone buzzed again, this time, a call from Brandon. I let it go to voicemail. Then another text from Emily. "We're on our way. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I felt a surge of adrenaline. I wasn't going to let them do this to me. Not again, not ever. I went to my office and opened the safe. Inside were years of financial records, every check, every wire transfer, every loan I'd given them. I pulled out the folder labeled Emily and Brandon and flipped through the pages. Over $1.2 million in 8 years. I'd paid for their house, their cars, their kids' tuition, their failed businesses. And still, it wasn't enough. I realized then that the only way to break the cycle was to walk away, to let them face the consequences of their actions, to show them that love doesn't mean endless sacrifice, that respect has to be earned. I packed a small suitcase, just the essentials, passport, a few changes of clothes, my laptop, and the documents I'd need. I booked a one-way ticket to Costa Rica, a place I'd always dreamed of visiting, but never had the time. I left my phone on the kitchen counter, turned off. I wrote a short note and placed it on the table. Sometimes the only way to save someone is to let them fall. As I locked the door behind me, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, I was choosing myself. But little did they know, I wasn't going to stay broken for long. The airport was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that feels like a new beginning. As I waited for my flight, I watched the sunrise paint the Austin skyline in gold and pink. I thought about everything I was leaving behind. My house, my business, my old life. But most of all, I thought about Emily. I wondered if she'd even notice I was gone. Or if she'd just be angry that the money hadn't appeared in her account. I checked my email one last time before boarding. There were 3 new messages from Emily, each more frantic than the last. "Dad, where are you? We're at the house and you're not here. This isn't funny. Call me back." I could almost hear her voice, sharp with entitlement and panic. I ignored them all. As the plane took off, I felt the weight of years of family drama, betrayal, and broken trust begin to lift. I realized I'd spent my whole life trying to fix other people's mistakes, to keep the peace, to be the hero. But heroes don't always get happy endings sometimes. They just get used up. I landed in Costa Rica just after noon. The air was warm and humid, the kind of air that makes you feel alive. I checked into a small hotel by the beach, paid in cash, and turned off my phone for good. For the first time in decades, I was truly unreachable. That night, I sat on the balcony, listening to the waves crash against the shore. I thought about what Emily and Brandon must be doing. I pictured them pounding on my door, finding it locked, and discovering the box I'd left behind. Inside, they'd find every record of every dollar I'd ever given them. Every loan, every gift, every bailout. They'd see the total over $1 million and realize just how much they'd taken for granted. But that wasn't all. I'd also included copies of Brandon's gambling debts, the failed business contracts, and the prenup he'd signed without reading the fine print. I wanted them to see the truth, to understand that their actions had consequences. I wanted them to feel the sting of justice served, the cold slap of karma. I knew it wouldn't be easy for them. I knew they'd be angry, that they'd blame me for everything. But I also knew it was the only way. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let someone hit rock bottom. Only then can they start to climb back up. As the days passed, I settled into a new routine. Morning swims in the ocean, long walks on the beach, and fresh coffee at a local cafe. I started to feel like myself again. Like the man I'd been before I became a walking ATM for my family. I made friends with the locals, learned a little Spanish, and even started volunteering at a community center. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. But I couldn't stop thinking about Emily. I wondered if she'd ever understand why I left, if she'd ever forgive me. I wondered if she'd finally learn the lessons I'd tried to teach her all along. That money isn't love, that respect can't be bought, that real family is built on trust, not transactions. One evening, as the sun set over the Pacific, I got an email from my lawyer, James. He'd been handling my affairs back in Texas, making sure everything was in order. "They found the box," he wrote. "Emily called me in tears. Brandon's gone. She's lost the house, the cars, everything. She wants to know if you'll come back." I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart heavy. I wanted to rush back, to fix everything, to be the father she needed, but I knew I couldn't. Not this time. This was her journey now, and that's when I discovered the perfect way to ruin them. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with the one thing they never expected: letting go. Back in Costa Rica, I watched the days pass with a strange sense of calm. I knew Emily and Brandon were scrambling, desperate to regain control. But for the first time, I wasn't the one cleaning up their mess. I was free from the cycle of toxic relationships, family conflict, and emotional blackmail that had defined my life for years. But I wasn't just running away. I was setting the stage for a lesson they'd never forget, a lesson in accountability, respect, and the true meaning of family. My plan wasn't about petty revenge or dramatic confrontation. It was about justice served, about letting karma do its work, and about finally breaking the chains of generational conflict. James, my lawyer, kept me updated. He told me how Emily tried to access the family accounts, only to find them frozen. The house she thought she owned, legally, it was still in my name. The cars, the credit cards, the trust funds for the grandkids, every asset was protected, every loophole closed. Years of careful planning had paid off. I'd made sure that if they ever crossed the line, I could pull the plug without warning. Emily's calls became more frantic. She left voicemails, sent emails, and even tried to contact me through old friends. "Dad, please, we're in trouble. Brandon's gone. I don't know what to do." I listened to each message, my heart aching, but I didn't respond. I knew that if I gave in now, the cycle would start all over again. Meanwhile, Brandon's world was unraveling. The creditors he'd tried to outsmart were closing in. He'd burned every bridge, maxed out every favor, and now he was on his own. Emily, for the first time in her life, had to face reality without a safety net. I left one final gift for her, a storage unit key, tucked inside the box on the porch. Inside the unit were all the things she'd left behind over the years: childhood photos, her grandmother's jewelry, a savings bond in her name, and a letter from me. In the letter I wrote, "This is your chance to start over. I love you, but I can't save you from yourself. Only you can do that now." The days in Costa Rica were simple. I taught English to the local school, learned to cook with fresh ingredients, and found peace in the rhythm of the waves. I realized that my own happiness had always been tied to other people's approval, to the endless demands of family drama and broken trust. Now, I was learning to live for myself. But I never stopped caring about Emily. I checked in with James, making sure the grandkids' tuition was paid, that Emily had enough to survive if she chose to work for it. I wanted her to have a chance, but I wasn't going to hand it to her. She had to earn it. The suspense built with every update. Emily tried to sell her designer bags, her jewelry, and even her wedding dress. She applied for jobs, faced rejection after rejection, and finally landed a position at a department store. For the first time, she was earning her own money, learning the value of hard work and sacrifice. Brandon, meanwhile, disappeared completely. Rumors told he'd skipped town, changed his name, maybe even left the country. Emily was left to pick up the pieces, to face the consequences of her choices. I watched from afar, resisting the urge to step in. I knew that real change only comes when you have no other option. I wanted Emily to find her own strength, to rebuild her life from the ground up. But when the day finally came, everything changed. The day everything changed was a humid afternoon in June. I was sitting on the beach, watching the waves roll in, when I got an email from James. The subject line was simple: "She's ready." I opened it, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and hope. Inside was a message from Emily. It wasn't a demand, or a plea, or an accusation. It was an apology. She wrote, "Dad, I finally understand. I'm working 2 jobs now. I'm paying my own rent. I'm learning what it means to stand on my own. I was angry at you for leaving, but now I see you were saving me from myself. I'm sorry for everything. I hope one day you can forgive me." I sat there for a long time, letting the words sink in. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was the justice I'd been waiting for. Not revenge, not payback, but real growth. Karma had done its work, and the cycle of entitlement was finally broken. Back in Texas, Emily's life had changed completely. She'd lost the house, the cars, the designer clothes. She was living in a small apartment, budgeting every dollar, learning the value of honest work. The grandkids were still in school, their tuition paid by the trust I'd set up years ago. Brandon was gone, a ghost from a past life she no longer wanted. I replied to her email, keeping it simple: "I'm proud of you. I always loved you. I just needed you to love yourself too." That summer, I returned to Austin for a visit. Emily met me at a small cafe, her hair pulled back, her eyes clear and bright. She hugged me, really hugged me. Not for show, not for leverage, but because she wanted to. We talked for hours, not about money or mistakes, but about life, about the future, about forgiveness. She told me about her new job, her plans to go back to school, and her dreams for her kids. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't need to. She'd finally learned the lesson I'd tried to teach her all along: that respect, trust, and love are earned, not bought. As I left the cafe, I realized that this was the ending I'd always hoped for. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a petty revenge, but a quiet, satisfying story of justice served and family restored. The pain of betrayal had given way to the peace of forgiveness. The cycle of toxic relationships and family conflict was finally broken. Now I spend my days between Costa Rica and Texas, living life on my own terms. Emily and I talk often, not as debtor and bank, but as father and daughter. The grandkids visit in the summers, and we make new memories, ones built on trust, not transactions. Tell me, do you think this revenge was fair, or did they deserve even worse? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional storytelling, family drama, and the most satisfying revenge stories on YouTube.